Uh-huh.
Okay, we're recording there. About a minute.
Does that mean that the other screen, the other camera isn't going, or just that
It
screen
was
is
just
out?
an in-house.
Okay.
We do a couple in-houses.
Backup kind of thing.
Okay, smart.
Yeah, there's no backups.
So I better be
We got
good.
one shot, one take.
No, I
Yes.
didn't want to say that. Can we repeat that again? Edit that out later.
Okay, we're gonna go live and gonna go audio.
So I'll never be able to see this because we're going live.
Oh yeah, it'll be archived.
Okay.
Yeah, we get more guests in the archive than we do in the live version.
See.
People appointment viewing is it's dying. You know.
Right, it's 9 o'clock. I'm gonna go record.
You can tell I need another studio.
Hmm.
Good evening. Welcome to the Spiritual But Not Religious Show. I'm your host, George Lewis. I've got a great guest tonight. I have Ann Morrison of Broadway fame, and going to be a very interesting guest. I spent a couple hours with her the other night, and we had just a great chat. We're figuring that if we can cram 5 hours worth of stuff into one, we'll be able to entertain you a bit tonight. So my guest next week is and also equally exciting man. His name is Steve McAllister. Steve has written a book called The McAllister Code, and it's a fiction book, but it's about bringing spirituality into your business life, which I think we could probably use in this day. Before I get into the conversation here with Annie, let me tell you a bit about the Spiritual Broadcasting Network, what we're about, what we're doing. You know, the four main religions all have their places that they congregate. They have churches. They have, the Christian Broadcasting Network. They have a voice in the community. The spiritual but not religious community is something that's really developed over the last 15 or 20 years. It's a huge community at this point, but we don't really gather anywhere. I wouldn't say most of us, many of us don't go to church. We have no real way to connect, and our voices are really diverse. There are every kind of belief that you can think of, but with the common denominator that there's some kind of a higher power involved. And so we're working at bringing those diverse voices to you, where you can hear them, see them, decide what where you want to become involved, and try and maybe have an impact on what I believe is happening as far as a transformation going on in the earth today. And hopefully we transform fairly soon. The way things are going right now, it's pretty insane out there. So Annie, good to have you here
Good
tonight.
to be here.
Oh, I've been absolutely looking forward to our evening.
Good.
Annie is she's been in many Broadway plays and much off Broadway work, a lot of local work, and she does something really pretty unique. I think it was your idea around uh, coming into your home and putting a play on.
It's not really.
Not your idea?
No, not my idea.
Okay, well,
I borrowed it
did you
from
borrow it?
musicians.
Well,
Yes.
but as far
House
as
concerts,
but
right?
okay, you got it from house
And it's
concerts.
actually much older than that. People used to have not soirees, but salons.
Oh,
Before
right.
we had television or radio,
Absolutely.
you had people come over and they would play music and they'd sing and they'd do poetry and the Celts would have ceilidhs, where people come along with their guitars and their harps and sing and do a round of stories. And with that, art's gone. We have television,
Right.
and now that the economy has tanked or has had a real struggle, people are not going out. They're holding on. They're afraid to go and spend their money,
Can't
so
afford
they're
to go.
staying home. And so I thought, well, if you're not going to go to the theater, then I'll come to you.
The
We'll just
theater
go right
will
to your
come.
living. And quite often, I like to perform right in front of your television. So that's why.
So Annie, by the way, will she does some marvelous work. Will come wherever you are if expenses.
Sure, I'll come
And
anywhere.
I think she mentioned that she,
It's a profound evening. Yeah.
and it's very powerful. I just was at a play that Annie did. She had written, directed, and starred in.
Oh, I didn't direct it.
That's right.
Right, Blake Walton directed it.
Blake
Right,
Walton directed it. You did everything but direct
right.
it. And it's a marvelous play. And I think you just got a grant to get it.
I just found out last night I got a grant too. I can really develop it into a full length evening of a play. Right.
And what's your plan? You're gonna like take that to Broadway? See if you can't get
Well,
to New
we have
York.
to go back to the beginning of the story to really understand where it evolved from.
Okay.
And I guess we have to almost go back to the Glen.
Yeah.
But
Before we go there, let's talk about your early beginnings.
all right,
All right, and then I'll bring us back. I didn't know we were going to run into.
with me you'll go anywhere.
I will, and it's fun. So, if you had your father was a grandfather,
Well, I had one of those. I had one of. I
but
had several.
your grandfather was a tarot reader.
No,
That's your father.
no, none of them. Wrong, wrong, wrong. I'll tell you all about me. My folks were theater people, musical theater. My father was a composer. He was a music professor. He was a combination of Danny Kaye and Victor Borga. He was
Oh,
a very
really?
funny man. Yes, very funny man. Wonderful storyteller. I get a lot of my storytelling gift from my father. My mother was a complete wonderful Renaissance woman. She was a visual artist. She was a modern dancer. She was a choreographer. She wrote plays. She wrote lyrics. She collaborated with my father. She designed plates. She studied at the Art Institute in Chicago. She just did everything. I'd come home from school, and sometimes my mom would be on the ladder hammering, and my dad was in the kitchen cooking.
Aha.
So there was just they created 3 ballets, 1 opera, and 3 musicals. So I grew up thinking that was normal. That moms and dads were creative, and everybody collaborated, and life was about cooperating. It wasn't until I left to go out into school that I realized that there was another C word. It was called competition, and I still haven't figured it out. I don't understand that world at all.
Well, the problem with competition. It's kind of warlike, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah. No, I'd
kind
rather collaborate. The collaboration is much more fun to me. Whatever.
So
So they were quite wonderful and quite mystical. I mean, my mother was. One of the beautiful art songs that they wrote was called Enchantment, and it's the voice of one of the She. We're Celts, or we're Scottish, and the She is the Celtic word for the fairies.
okay.
And one of the voices of the She is singing in the Black Mountains of Scotland, and it's a beautiful, beautiful song. And so when they would both transition, and I got to death walk them, meaning I was the child that walked them through the process
Right.
of taking them into the other world and coming back again. And I've done that for lots of people. In fact, the shamans, my Native American shamans, call me a death walker. But I had the great
Was
privilege
that
of doing that
something
with
that
my.
just was very natural for
It
you?
was very natural for me, and that we'll get into that story about the whole
Right.
emotional transformational work,
Right.
which is where that kind of came out of. But having the privilege of death walking both them, I had gone with my family to many places to deliver some ashes, and I thought I would take the last bit of ashes to Scotland, since they were both of Scottish descent. My father, being a Morrison, was originally from the Butt of Lewis. My mother, being a Walker, was a part of the MacGregor clan, so she was in the southern part of Scotland.
I heard Lewis in there. Tell me.
But the Butt of Lewis, if you go to the Hebrides, on the outer islands there of Scotland, the Butt of Lewis is at the top of the Hebrides, and it's the island of Lewis, and they're called the Butts at the top.
Oh,
That's
okay.
where the family originally came from.
Is that Louis or
L-E,
Le?
L-E-W, yeah, I-S, Lewis.
I'm supposed to have
So-
some Scottish descent in here
I
somewhere.
wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah. So yeah, I'm a Scot. Lots of other stuff going in there, but mainly a lot of Scottich blood.
Yeah,
So
I'm
I
kind
thought
of
it'd be a lot of fun to go there. And so I went on sabbatical. Now I had worked on. I'm not going back early enough, but that's. Yeah, I know you will jump around all over the place. I was working on a sabbatical. Because I had created a one-woman show based on Celtic mythology and storytelling because of my love of Scottish lore and
Right.
Celtic lore. And that's what got me over there with their ashes too, because I thought as I'm working on my sabbatical, I was going to go through all of England, Glastonbury. I happen to be a little of a neo-druid, and was initiated as a sapling in a Druid order in Glastonbury, England, which was quite profound. And then I went up to Scotland to the Isle of Skye because I didn't know where to put my folks, and I figured Skye was a beautiful place to go. Never been there, and it was an area that I wanted to spend some time on my sabbatical because one of the characters that I wanted to write about in my show had a castle at one point. Scoha had a castle in the island Skye, so I thought perfect place to be. And that's where a very mystical thing happened. We can talk about that in a little bit. But my folks were very profound teachers for me, and got me involved in the theater at a very young age.
Well, the plan was that you would go to Broadway. Is that was what they had in mind?
No, my folks never liked that. Whatever I wanted to do, they would support totally. It's just that I grew up in. I mean, my sister was Shakespearean actress at one point. My brother was a photographer. My sister went off into college and decided she wanted to do an art project for her communications class. So she had a sculpture that she wrote a poem to and then gave it to the entire family to express through art so she could prove that through art you can do massive different kinds of ways of communicating. So my dad wrote a beautiful song. My mother created a dance out of it. We filmed it. She taught it to me. I danced it for her. I sang the words to my dad's song that he created. My brother did a whole photography thing. It was a whole family experience,
Right.
And that's just normal for us. Now, we were very highly musical theater oriented, so
Right. So
that's
it just was natural to.
natural for me. I knew that's where I was headed. I
Well,
knew that at 5.
got a great
Yeah.
voice.
Well,
Yeah.
that was my instrument. I never really learned to play the piano, which my dad was a great pianist, because this was my instrument, and that's what I wanted to focus on.
Right.
And this instrument has been an amazing instrument for me for more than just singing. I mean, I discovered a massive amount of healing from this part of my body. So, and that was when I went off to California, and we'll get into that. How I thought I was going for another reason to California, but it ended up being another aspect of my spiritual journey, which took me into deep emotional transformational work. So, no, my folks were wonderful. My mother raised me in Joseph Campbell. They weren't really religious people. I mean, my father's family were Episcopalians, and my mother's family were Lutherans, but
Well, I wouldn't call Campbell religious, that's for sure.
No,
but
he wasn't.
Definitely
He
was
didn't
a
know it.
spiritual man.
oh, yeah, absolutely. And he was trying to show. I mean, everybody was so busy looking at why everything in all mythologies, and that's that. You be careful. Christians don't like to know that their religion is a mythology.
Well, it's
They get
based
very upset.
in myth.
But all
Everything.
religions are mythologies.
Yeah.
And he said, instead of looking at all the things that are different about them, let's see where they're all similar.
Right.
And I was very taken by a statement that Joseph made. In fact, I based a lot of my first one-woman show on it. He said that it's time for us to create a new mythology, but we're all moving too quickly as a race to do that.
Right.
So his suggestion was, because our cosmology has shifted, we need a new mythology. So he suggested you find an old mythology, preferably one you didn't grow up with, because the ones you grew up with, you have a tendency to think are fact, and then you miss the whole point.
Right.
Find an old mythology that feels good to you, and you evolve it to your present cosmology, thus creating your own spirituality. And I thought that was beautiful. In fact, we know George Lucas was very taken by that same idea and created Star Wars.
He credits Campbell with was exactly the development of Star Wars.
Yeah,
Very powerful stuff. I didn't really get introduced to Campbell until Bill Moyer came along.
Right.
And did his TV series with
No,
Campbell.
my mom had me on Campbell even before that.
And it was like, wow, it was really kind of
And when he came on
mind-blowing to me.
camera, it was unbelievable. We sat in front of the TV. We were just mesmerized.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
It was like, it was great.
I still watch those.
Yeah, he was a sweet man. And I got to meet his wife when I was in New York. She was she was a modern dancer. Yeah,
Ah.
she tells the story because he had always bringing books into the house, and he if he was going to bring another book in, she said they were just wall to wall books. In fact, their
Right.
coffee table was just a piece of glass on piled books. And she said, if you bring one more book in this house, a book's going to have to leave. And she threatened. She'd start pulling a book away. Here, it's going to go. It's going to go if you bring this in the house. But
It made him think twice about bringing the book in.
But she was a dear. She was very sweet.
I think it was a real loss that we lost him. It was like there was still much that he had to do. Well, when we talk about myth, if the Constantine, who was the Roman emperor, really
Right.
responsible for Christianity in its present form,
Right.
more than even the writers of the books that he created the first Bible, and like it was the mythology of the then religion that they pulled this from, so that it would be more accepted by the Romans. So kind of
Yeah, you
interesting.
don't find truth in facts. You find truth in
Oh, for sure.
myth and story. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's where you're going to find it.
and then and then that what morphed into the from the Roman Empire, which was failing, into modern Christianity and the Roman Catholic Church. It's like pretty powerful, pretty far.
And I got very fascinated. So, because of that, then I wanted to find an old mythology that fit for me. And I was very fascinated by nature based spirituality because it was such a just a beautiful expression of where we are. And I could see that our planet was in trouble. So, why not go back to one of the nature based spiritualities to evolve to our cosmology? And at the time, I was very attracted to the Native American traditions.
Right.
When I got out to California, thinking that I was going to be doing television, which we can get into, I met a fascinating group of people that were doing deep emotional release work. And when I was working with a couple of people that were terminally ill on deep emotional release, um, it was a beautiful man. He said, I'm fascinated that you're interested in the Native American tradition because you told me when you were a little girl you saw the she, you saw the fairies.
Right.
Now, when I saw the fairies, I didn't see those little funny little things around flowers that the Victorian society decided was what fairies were. Um, I saw them like the Celts did, like you in Lord of the Rings, you would see the elves. I saw otherworldly beings, you know,
And they
and they
definitely
were the
were.
she. Yeah, they were amazing, and they played with me. They taught me. You know, I was very 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 close to
This
them
was you were
when
five,
I was little.
about
Yeah,
five, 4,
you know,
5,
because when you're a child, you see from the heart. You don't
and
see
you're
with your
open,
eyes. Absolutely.
and you're
And then
open.
it starts to go when you get involved with Barbie dolls and bikes and all that other stuff that other children do. Then the part of your heart that sees starts to go blind for a little while as you grow up. And if you're lucky enough to have someone keep it open for you, and that happened for me when I was in a car accident at 13, and I went through the white light. And once you go through the white light and are asked to come back, you're just never the
So
same.
tell us
So
about the
that's
white
where
light. What
that's
was
when
it?
things started opening up again for
What
me.
was that experience for you? What do you
Well,
recall?
I was involved with theater, and my mother and father were starting a new theater company for the summertime up in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. We were living in the Chicago area, and the director of the that particular show that I was, we were doing the Red Shoes, and I
Right.
was playing Gemma the Clown. I remember, and it happened to be my dad's birthday, and we were getting in the car, and we were all going to go out and have dinner together, but we never got there. Um, I was told later that because I don't remember a car, although once I started doing some release and memories started to come back, I do now have seen the car coming at me.
Right.
We just happened to be in two lanes that were shut down on a bridge and bumper to bumper traffic. And a guy got out of his lane and wasn't thinking. He was watching two girls travel on the bridge and plowed right into us. And we had nowhere to
Wow.
go. We just had to stay there. So I guess they had the jaws of life to get me out of the car. But while they were all doing that, I was going through the white light. And I'll never. There was this figure at the end, and I still don't know who that figure was, but it felt good. And I was told, turn around. This isn't right. It's not time, sweetie. Go
Did
back.
you want to come back, or did you have some kind of a
I
feel?
don't think I was attached to come or go.
Right.
I just was very confused. I just know that where I was going was very beautiful, and I had a connection that that anything had happened to me. So I just knew that I was being attracted. And then when you lift back into the body and start assessing things, it's just never the same. You know, I had no fear of death anymore.
How,
And I had started having memories of things that I had no one to speak to about. It was a lonely period of my life.
not
Yeah.
very many. There aren't. Not that many people have had that kind of
Yeah.
experience. There are a lot. We hear about it because of the media, but as far as numbers
When I
of
thought I
people,
was a monster, I came back and I had this huge scar on my face and smashed out my teeth and had a brain injury too on top of that,
oh wow,
and didn't realize it. I didn't realize it too much later in life when I started working with persons with developmental disabilities, persons with Down syndrome and cerebral palsy and profound mental disabilities and autism and Asperger's and Williams syndrome. And then we started working with people with brain injuries. And I brought in a brain injury expert to just enlighten me, what's going on. And as he was talking, I said, oh my goodness, I've had a brain injury. And I explained about what happened to me in a car accident.
right.
And he said, most definitely had a brain injury. And I said, well, some of the things that I always assumed was my inability to remember people's names is also because I'm dyslexic. But there are other things that I just don't track. I just track the world differently, and it very possibly is because my brain got jiggled a little bit.
That's really
Yeah.
interesting that you don't remember people's names very well because you learn these big long scripts.
Yeah, that part of my brain just doesn't work very well.
That's interesting.
But I can remember your phone number.
Is that right?
Yeah, so go
That's,
figure.
that's weird.
And I never forget your face.
Right.
And I don't track consciousness by what people say in the past. The past doesn't mean anything to me. It's just, I'm always a kind of a now kind of person anyway. So
It's the only place things really
right,
are.
there's the now, there's the unfamiliar now, and there's the familiar now as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
But definitely, if you ask me, people come up to me and talk about conversations they had years and years ago. I have no recollection, but I can tell you how I felt, and probably how you felt in 1972 in July 5th. I mean, I tracked totally on the emotional field.
Well, that's interesting. You're the first person I've talked with. I'm that same way. And I'll go to a movie. I don't remember the movie. I
Remember everything emotional.
but I got the feelings with it. And the most impacting days of my life. I don't remember the circumstances that
Right.
much, but I sure remember how I felt.
Well, this is interesting because we're jumping all over in our conversation. That's
That's all
kind
right.
of fun, you know.
Yeah.
It's very ADD. It's great, but
We'll try and track with you.
Oh, I love that. I was fascinated by Dr. Ramachandran, who's a man who's an expert on neuro science, and he's done a tremendous amount of work on looking at people with brain injuries. And he was on Nova, and I just was helping my dad and mom move into a small little house, and we were exhausted. And I don't like to watch the TV, but it flipped it on. I couldn't think about anything else, and I look up, and they love to watch PBS.
Right.
Thank goodness. And Nova was on, and it was like halfway through the program. I couldn't wait for the video to come out so that I could actually see the beginning of it. But the last half of it, last little bit of it, he was talking about a man who had brain seizures.
Uh-huh.
And when his brain lit up, now this is from my understanding, the limbic system in his brain, the limbic part of his brain also lit up. He was having tremendous amounts of emotional release going on, which I understand is an emotional healer, and we can talk about that. But when that part of his brain lit up, the frontal cortex, right here, which Dr. Ramachandran would call it the G spot,
Right.
the God spot, which is interesting. We talk about this being the third eye,
Right.
and being able to see, also lit up tremendously. And he says people have spiritual awakenings, spiritual epiphanies.
It all happens right here.
This part of the brain completely lights
Right.
up thoroughly. So this part of his brain would light up at the same time, and he would go through hours, days of feeling like he was Jesus Christ or some enlightened Buddha, and didn't want anyone to ever change it. He was majorly enlightened. In fact, Dr. Ramachandran said, I wouldn't want to fix that at all.
No.
No, this is an amazing experience.
Right.
Well, I burst into tears. Because when I go into deep emotional release I don't understand when people say they don't want to feel anything. They don't want to feel they want to feel anything. I said, what are you talking about? I go into deep euphoria. I go into amazing euphoria when I feel. I go into deep release, and everything in my system gets heightened. My fingers get heightened. I rub my fingers against the table, and I go into a complete orgasm all the way up through my heart, through the top of my head. I can go out and hug a tree and go, I just feel like Carrie Ann just went right through me. I mean, it's like amazingly, and it lasts for hours and hours and hours. It's an intense spiritual experience.
Well, that's very connected with the way that you stay in the now.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think the reason that most people don't want to feel is because they're out in the future somewhere
Yeah.
with fear, or
Yeah.
they got the regrets of the past and they're not in the moment. So,
Yeah.
and not many people can stay in the moment like
Right.
I'm hearing,
Right.
which in your line of work
Right.
has to be wonderful.
Well, when I was first doing my first Broadway show in 1981, I was very, very nervous about it, and I was actually going to be the female lead in the show, and I was 25, and I had to lie about my age. It was a musical called Merrily We Roll Along, written
Right.
by Stephen Sondheim,
Right.
and Hal Prince was directing it, and these were the two musical theater gods. And it was interesting because I really felt like after 81, the theater scene really changed drastically. We lost the book musical, and they were going into the musicals that were no book.
Right.
And even when I got to New York, I was all excited because I grew up on the Hal Prince musicals, the musicals of the 50s and the 60s
Sure.
and the 40s. And by the time I got there in the 80s, that era had died. That Hal Prince was the kind of man who made stars. He loved that. And he and I just recently worked in '07 together doing another. He brought me back to New York. And we both had a rude awakening. We were dinosaurs. It wasn't about making Broadway stars anymore. It was about having film stars and television stars come and make your show. Here, Hal Prince is the king of Broadway, and his name doesn't mean anything anymore, you know.
Well, and that's exactly what
right,
happens.
right.
Film stars come to Broadway.
Yeah.
And
So here I am in '81, and I had friends who were going to see Swami Muktananda. It was a big deal at the time. And I'm not a follower. I'll go see this. I love all different mythologies, and I learn a lot from all of them.
right.
But I'm not a guru follower.
No, I'm not.
But
either.
I thought it'd be fun to go see him. So I'm sitting there, and everybody's going, "Oh, Namah Shivaya." You know, I'm going, I'm bopping away, and I'm having my back injury beginning to bother me, and I can't. I'd much rather lay down than have to sit up. And all of a sudden, he comes around and bops us all with peacock's feathers, and I go into instant enlightenment. I'm having an out-of-body experience. In fact, for days, I was out of my body. In and out, in and out. And here I'm trying to do a Broadway show. But, I would go to bed at night, and I'd feel like I'm being pulled out of my chest. And I was terrified because I was seeing the white light again. And I was seeing that entity at the other end. I said, oh, my God, I'm dying. I've been through this before. I'm dying.
Right.
And I can't figure out what I did. What is happening to me that I'm be dying right now? And then I realized, I remember Swami Muktananda said, if you ever get lost, just call out my name. And I said, well, he's not my guru, but I'll give it a try. And I realized everything was going to be fine. And I felt this hand go, and out I went. I felt myself spinning. And I could feel the other body feeling what it felt like, the limitation of the ceiling. And I looked down, and there was my body on the bed. And I realized that I had been doing this all along since my car accident, probably before.
Right.
But I wasn't in that. I wasn't aware of before when I was really aware of being in sleep paralysis.
So it was like a dream state for you?
Well, we'll always leave our bodies.
Right.
But when those of us who wake up, where our mind wakes up and we realize we're still in sleep paralysis,
right.
Your body has to do that, otherwise you sleepwalk while you're dreaming. And that's why people sleepwalk, because
Sure.
that mechanism stops for some reason. They just get up and they act it out. If you find yourself, that's what happens. You realize you're still in sleep paralysis, but your mind is still going, and you can actually then lift. You have the consciousness of feeling the sensation, where your mind isn't recording it as a dream.
Right.
Because when we wake up, that's what we think has happened. So it was quite profound. And I had all my friends who were following Swami Muktananda were jealous of me. Said, "How is it? We've been going for 7 years. You get bopped over the head and you're out of your body."
They pay thousands of dollars for that experience. If they, whatever it took to have, yeah.
So it was quite fun. Yeah, and then I started realizing the things that I was auditioning for was now going to people with television credits. I had gone off and starred in the West End in London with a musical there, Peg of My Heart.
Right.
That was a fun story too, because at the time I had a very dear friends, and he was a trance channeler, and he channeled his wife's main spirit guide,
Right.
and by the name of Sir Roger Thomas Granger, and he was quite profound entity that came through. Well, he told me that I was going to go off to London to do this musical, because I knew it was down to 4 actresses that were going to be flown to London. Very unusual thing, like a beauty contest. One of them was Mary Elizabeth Mastantuono, and well, this really matters. Christina Ebersole, and it was just quite fun. And me and Florence Ziegfeld wanted to come through and talk at the time.
Uh-huh.
And he said he would, if it was all right, he'd like to go along with me. I said, okay, fine with me. If you, Florence Ziegfeld, wants to go along with me, that's fine. He said, now you're going to get this. He said, I probably shouldn't tell you that, but you're going to get this, and just follow my lead. When you get that little urge to move, do it. I went, okay. And it was funny, because every time the stage manager would stand on one side of the stage I was always the last to come on. The other 3
Right.
ladies would come in. He said, always show them your right side, Annie. That's your best side. And that for everybody else, they would be turning this way. As soon as I'd come on the stage, all 3 times, the stage manager didn't know why. He just got up, he walked across to the other side of the stage, and I always auditioned the opposite direction so that my right side showed.
Wow.
I did get the show. I did get the part. And I was having this amazing experience now in England because my my friend decided to also go. They were going to spend some time in England too. I was there for about 8 months, and they got this wonderful little cottage just outside of Glastonbury, England. And so that's where my wonderful experience of being in Glastonbury, which is, for my experience, what I would say it's the heart chakra of the planet. You know, it's tremendously beautiful, and that's all the King Arthur lore is there,
Right.
and I have tremendous past lives with that, many Druid past lives. It was a wonderful experience. So I'm jumping. I know I'm jumping all over, but
I want to
yeah,
stay with this, but for our audience,
yeah.
tell them what you know as a druid, what that means.
Well, yeah, I'm leading because I know I said earlier that was working with people on emotional release, and the guy said, "Why are you thinking about going into Native American tradition when really you're a Druid?
Right.
Build me an altar.
Right.
Build me an altar and send me the fairies." So this was before that experience, though. So my first connection with Druidry was that time when I was going off in '84 to do Peg in My Heart in London, and we
Right.
would take on our holiday the weekend. We would go take the train out to Glastonbury and spend time out there, and meeting old Druids. You know, it was just a glorious thing. The Druids were nature based. I mean, that they are the indigenous people of Europe. You know, the
Nature
indigenous,
based,
yeah,
and they were
nature
love and
based.
peace. If I'm not,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Julie, you can't pay any attention to what Julius Caesar wrote about them because he wanted to get rid of the Celts. And he realized, and one way to get rid of the Celts was to destroy the Druids. They were the spiritual teachers of the tribes.
That's why they got
So
rid of Christianity the
right,
same way, right?
Yeah, well,
Yep, I think.
yeah. Well, and then Christianity came along and got rid of the Druids too. I mean, St. Patrick. The
The
whole
whole
reason why they say they got rid of the snakes in Ireland really means they
was
got
the
rid of the
Druids,
Druids. Yeah.
right? Yeah.
But yeah, so they were very. I mean, the Druids would go out there and mediate during a war. Caesar couldn't have that going on. It's another interesting thing. There's always this story about the Wicker Man. In fact, there was a wonderful film done in England called The Wicker Man. Americans tried to do a version of it here, and it was just horrible, horrible
Yeah,
script.
yeah, well,
Terrible, terrible,
fell
terrible
through,
movie.
didn't.
Just terrible. But the one in England was quite fun. In fact, Christopher Plummer starred in it. It was great fun, great wild fun, but misinformation
Right.
about we believe that because they heard from the Romans that they would put a man inside this wicker man with all this something. They would burn it up like a sacrifice. It would be a human sacrifice, and it was this is a horrible thing that would happen. Well, the reality was the shaman would go in there. They didn't stick around long enough to see what happened, and they were actually underneath like a little cave little place with hemp ropes and all this other stuff, and they were like on something and having this great enlightening experience. Things were burning on the top, and it was this purification thing. Once everything had burned down, then they stepped out of it and had this mystical experience. But the Romans didn't stick around long enough to see what was really going on there, so they thought this was a human sacrifice ceremony with the Wicker Man. Nope.
So that's this. Okay. Well, there's been some recent stuff. I was watching I think it was on PBS, I think, about the Druids and that they did a lot of human sacrifice. And
Well,
that
who
they,
didn't?
Well, yeah. I mean, it was all part of the
Yeah.
whole. Well, they were here during the Iron Age, right?
And before that, they've
Yeah.
been around a long time.
And
Yeah.
that was a whole different world from what we.
And there's still things we don't fully understand. I mean,
No.
when people say the Druids now, it's really not the same thing because we don't have Celtic tribes anymore. So you'd have to call it. It's almost like the Druids nowadays have taken, just like Joseph Campbell said, taken something that was old, created a new mythology with it, and have run with it. I mean, for back in the 1600s, 1700s, Druidry was very popular, but it was Christian Druidry.
Right.
You know.
We
A
don't
lot
even
of famous people were involved with that.
we don't even have a clue how we moved from the Dark Ages to the Renaissance. There's no, there's nothing indicating why that should have happened, but it did. It's,
Do you know who Leonard Slane is? He's just passed away not too long ago. He wrote The Alphabet versus the Goddess and Art and Physics. He's a wonderful writer. And he was also a neuroscientist, a surgeon actually. And he wrote some fascinating books. The Alphabet versus the Goddess is a wonderful book if you ever get a chance to read it. And this is just my theory, but he tracked how art went in and out of this way, and how spirituality, how he mapped how God and the goddess, God and the goddess, God and the goddess. How at one point in our spirituality, we were all worshiping the goddess, and then all of a sudden she was murdered.
Right.
And God started taking over. And whenever the masculine and the feminine are having this kind of a thing, we're watching how art is also going this way, and literacy. And he has this wonderful, I don't want to give it away, but it's a wonderful read. It's a beautiful read. And he just has an amazing theory about all that.
I'm not familiar with him.
Go look at it. Find him.
I will definitely try
It's a
that.
delightful read.
So let's come back to you a little bit,
Okay.
and let's talk about kaleidoscope
Okay.
and
Well,
how you came
When
there.
I'm dyslexic. Okay. And I felt that theater really saved my life in school. It was, I had terrible child abuse.
Was that because of the
terrible
right brain?
child abuse, not because of my folks, but because of the school
I
system.
expect, yeah.
Terrible, terrible. I went through so many, because when I was growing up, we didn't call it dyslexia. They didn't know what they call it, left-right problem. They call it this, that. I remember being in a horrible program that I think was run by Nazis. It was so shaming and so horrible, and screaming at us and yelling, and children throwing up in the corner and then making them clean up. It was just a horrible, horrible thing in Chicago.
Wow.
I have nothing to say nice about school, sorry. And so I had to safety net my child because my son is also dyslexic. So I got involved with the National Dyslexia Research Foundation when I was doing some work out in California. And
This was during the time you were
that
doing
time
the
I was also
emotional...
doing the emotional stuff. A lot of
Right.
amazing things are happening. And I thought, you know what, it'd be really great if I... And for me, musical theater is probably one of the most spiritual experiences for me because it's a whole brain experience. You've got the left hemisphere lighting up because of the language and the text. You've got the right hemisphere lighting up because of the music. It's also spatial, which is also the right hemisphere. You have logical things you have to deal with the storytelling. You have illogical things going on. It's just a whole brain experience.
Right.
And I thought, and it's surreal. I mean, people would say, oh, I don't like musicals because you don't believe it. And people don't just actually start singing. Unless you lived in my house. My dad and I would go grocery shopping and we'd start singing opera down the aisles to one another. So, yes, musical theater can exist in the world. But it was great fun. So I thought, well, gee, wouldn't it be great if I could start a musical theater program for some population of people that could really benefit from it? And at the time, I thought maybe it would be with learning different children.
Right.
Now I realize how kind of silly that was because half the industry is dyslexic. So what would I be doing that for?
Half of the
industry
Is
of
that
the
right?
art. Yes. Oh yeah. It really is. So in fact, I had a casting director tell me because I was a terrible cold reader.
Right.
Thank goodness for my wonderful husband at the time. He was very patient with me. I said, Blake, I have to get over this reading problem. And I just have to read out loud. I read out loud everything to him. And he just was a sweetheart. And he'd go, and never condescending. He'd go, now, that word, can you spell it? And so I'd spell it. I said, well, I think that word is such and such. Oh, he said, yeah, that's what that looks like in print. Yeah, that's what that looks like in print. Okay, great. So I knew.
So you
it
get
was
a
great.
visual
Yeah,
of the words.
he was just
and you
great
were
with
all
me.
right.
He was just
Ah,
great.
okay.
So when I came to when I finally left LA, my husband and I were going to split up for very loving reasons. We just realized that we were keeping each other from growing,
Right.
and let's dissolve the marriage and keep the friendship and figure out how to raise our son. But I was going to take Huck away for a while because I really felt that Blake needed some time to discover himself. He kind of was crawled up in my life, and Blake wasn't being Blake. So we split up, and I'm going to take him. I'm going to take Huck to Sarasota, Florida, because I know I can't. I don't want to go back to New York to raise my son for a while as a single parent. I needed help, and my folks, I set it down here because I had worked in Florida before with the Oslo Repertory Company
Right.
in '78, and thought, well, this would be a great place for them to come and retire, so I would come down there.
So that was during the old theater. The one
So I came in '90. Yeah, right.
Okay.
So I came in '90 and didn't leave. This community became very nurturing for me, and one of the reasons why I chose not to go to New York is because my son at 5. By the way, my son's name is Huckleberry.
I was
Huckleberry
going to
Walton.
have you bring that in.
Yeah. He loves his name. He calls himself Huck Walton. Wonderful singer, so wonderful spiritual child himself. We could talk about him too. But he said, "Mommy, why is it at 5? Why is it then what people say when people say what they're going to be when they grow up, they never are?" And that statement devastated me.
That's an interesting question.
I really
Yeah.
thought, oh my gosh, I have done my entire life for everybody else. I haven't been able to play out what I really wanted to do. I always wanted to be an actor. I had to go, what did I want to be when I was a little girl? Well, it was always about being an actress, but it was about doing theater with a purpose. And you could say, well, theater always has a purpose, but I mean really a profound experience.
Like a spiritual purpose.
Yeah.
That's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Right.
And it had to impact. Broadway was fine, but Broadway was community theater with a lot of money, as far as I was concerned.
Right.
And I wasn't seeing a lot of really profound stuff. It's out there, but that's what I needed to do. That's what I want to do.
Right.
And I was told that my dream was too small, that I needed to be a Broadway star and all that kind of stuff. And it doesn't mean anything to me.
And
It
who,
never did.
when you say you were told that, that was by
It doesn't matter.
just everybody.
Yeah.
I gotcha. All right.
So I decided I had to go prove to my son and myself that you could be what you wanted to be when you were little. And that wasn't going back to New York then. It was creating that. So this was a very nurturing community for me. They allowed me to
Right.
do one-people shows, cabaret acts, where I did about 7 different kinds of cabaret acts, which were like one-person shows anyway.
Sure.
Because I had to have a focus. It had to have a through line. It had a whole arc. And yes, it was entertaining and funny, but it was profound. That was my goal.
And it had purpose
And
and,
it had a
meaning.
purpose. And I met this wonderful woman by the name of Susan E. Ott, who was doing a lot of. She was my musical director for cabaret, but and teaching at the Oslo. And we thought, wouldn't it be great if we could start this musical theater company, or just a workshop for someone? And we were tired of teaching little rich kids who were privileged, and we wanted to really impact somebody. But we didn't know what that population was going to be.
Right.
So we approached the Oslo State. Oh, excuse me, it was Oslo State. Now it's the Oslo Repertory Company.
Right.
And they were saying, hey, we couldn't come at a better time. We've just been approached by the Selby Foundation to give money to all the arts organizations that would hook up with the Human Resource Organization. And at the time, they suggested the Community Haven for Adults and Children. Which
That's in Sarasota here.
Here in Sarasota.
Right.
And their population were persons with developmental disabilities. So that's persons with Down syndrome,
Right.
cerebral palsy, profound mental disabilities, autism, what have you. And I learned when I was out on the road singing with a Korean family in nightclubs, which is another evening of stories right there, that as long as you don't know you can't do something, you can do everything.
Right.
And I learned to play the trombone in one afternoon, and you went out and you performed it that night. So, hey, I never taught this population before. I wasn't afraid of the population, as some people were, but we would just go in and do it. And we dove in head first, and I discovered I love these people. These were unconditional volunteers. They were totally here to sponsor the growth of the rest of us.
Right.
Some people say Down syndrome people are young souls coming into the planet. I feel the complete opposite. I think they're ancient souls who have one little thing they have to do, and they're totally here for us. Amazing spirits. So I am standing on the stage, their first performance. It was kind of they're teaching us how to communicate with them. We were teaching them what we thought was what we were supposed to do. And I'm
Right.
standing on the stage with little Linda Blum, who's a person with Down syndrome, and she wanted to do this poem. And she taught me her choreography for it. That was how we were going to learn. She told me that she needed to learn kinetically. So she taught me her choreography, and then always support. I always make sure that they are supported, that they will not fail.
Right.
So we discovered for her that I would just stand behind her, and I would do her choreography behind her, and then I would just speak the poem behind her, and she would then mimic what she could of it.
Right.
It ended up being a beautiful little piece. I'm on this stage, and I'm feeling this incredible love and energy from the stage going out to the house, and this incredible love and energy from the house coming up on the stage, and I'm caught in the middle of this vortex of just pure heart song. It was just amazing.
Oh, that's
And I went into a state of euphoria. And I said, I never felt this on Broadway.
absolute joy.
Absolute joy. This is where I belonged. This was theater with a purpose.
And not the competitive, I got to get to the top.
Oh, these people are, so I started bringing professional actors in to see how to work as a company.
Right.
Because they totally work so patient with one another. And because everybody had a different way of where their brains were shut down, their creativity was expressed differently. So your persons with Down syndrome had a completely different way of expressing their art, opposed to someone with Williams syndrome, which is another chromosome deficiency, but highly social people, but highly musical, or a brain injury or autism, or it was just amazing to watch. And these like a company of misfits,
Like
you know.
savants.
Yeah, fabulous.
Yeah. Okay.
Fabulous. Some people could understand abstract thought, some people could not. But wherever their way of communicating and creating that art was just fascinating.
So why don't we do this for our? Why don't we tie this together and
Okay.
let's go back to Scotland
Okay.
and let's go back to the Fairy Glen.
Okay. Well, before I do that, let me go quickly back to California.
Great.
Because this is
Then,
very
then
important.
bring us back through.
When
and then,
I was in California, when I left New York, thinking that now I had to get television credits in order to work on Broadway,
Right.
which, by the way, came true. You have to have television and be a film star now in order to be a star. The whole system in New York is broken.
Everything's
you
changed.
Said, yes, it changed.
Changed.
So, anyway, I went out there and I couldn't get arrested in television. I think it was written all over my face. I didn't like television.
Right.
And I believed it as a 20-year-old because I had a scar from my car accident on my face. I couldn't do film or television. I believed it.
It's amazing how a belief can just control our life, isn't it? Yeah.
And it's probably just as well because this is where I belonged.
Right.
Was on stage. I love live theater.
Right.
I love the experience of that arc that happens with which
The
is very
feedback
hard to
and-
do now because we have an audience field of a generation from television. So
Right.
they sit there like this and don't know how to energetically give back. It's a spiritual experience when you're in the live theater. You go
It
to a
is for
con
me.
music, yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So an audience has forgotten their role.
Right.
They're supposed to extend themselves out so that there's this pinnacle. And when that happens, when you go like this, that arc's like you leave your body and they leave their body, and you go like this, you don't get it all the time. When it happens, it's a turn on, and you just want the next. Got to have that. When will that ever happen again? And you get that group soul audience that comes up and they meet you. It's amazing experience.
And looking for more spiritual
Yeah.
juice tomorrow.
Yeah. You after you get addicted.
Right.
You don't get that on film.
Right.
You don't have that. The camera doesn't do that.
Well, no, as a matter of fact, it's so disconnected.
So disconnected, yeah.
Even with your fellow actors.
Right. Now it's immortalized, you
Right.
know, but I don't care about that. I'm the person of the now.
Right.
The performance you got that night, you're never going to see again.
Right.
You know, and isn't that fun? You know, so how do you sort of do you recreate as best you can? You want the audience to have an experience, you know, that's similar to the person that had before, but it can't be. It's going to be different. I love that.
But an experience that changes the audience in
Exactly.
some way.
Exactly.
Right.
So now here I am in LA, and so I'm trying to think I'm volunteering with the Louise L. Hay House, you know,
Right.
because this is like mid '80s, and Marianne Williamson and all those people are big wigs in the New Age community, and they're driving me crazy because they're making statements like the opposite of love is fear, and I'm about ready to pull my hair out because I'm thinking, how can you say that? That's such an unloving statement. How can you pit one emotion against love? Why don't you choose both? Why can't you let love take your fear and cradle it and maybe evolve it? I couldn't comprehend. And they'd look at me cross-eyed. It's like they kept wanting to leap over going into the dark part of the soul, which I know
Right.
as a shaman, you can't escape that one. You're going to have to go through it.
Yeah.
So you can say as many mantras as you want to. You can say as many affirmations you want to. But eventually, baby cakes, you got to do the homework.
Well, and that's the thing with New Age.
Right.
It is about avoiding.
Avoiding. It's about avoiding.
You know,
So therefore,
yeah.
how can you ever get to a place of unconditional love if you don't have all of yourself there to do it?
Right.
So you're going to have to go rescue yourself. So I found this amazing group of people that were doing profound, deep work in the dark. I mean, we just didn't want to even be on the radar. It was all underground because there were some people who had a fear that we might be attacked by the
Right.
New Age community or whatever. So it was like the 100th monkey principle. If we got enough people together to move deep, dark stuff and pull in loving light like there's no tomorrow, and hold open energetic space for people to do this work, maybe a consciousness could shift on this planet. I will tell you, I feel it really has. I'm hearing less and less people say the opposite of love is fear.
Right.
I'm hearing New Age ministers and science of mind people now saying less about it's all your thought, and maybe it's all right to actually feel something now. It's okay to drop in your heart. Now I'm hearing heart words. I never heard heart words. It was all about my head. Think this thought. But I wasn't hearing heart.
Well, it was about heart, or I mean head. That
Right.
was exactly. You know.
So we're working intensely with these people. I'm working with terminally ill with release. And it was a profound experience. I was learning how to become a death walker.
Right.
I was learning an amazing thing, so when I came to Sarasota, I created this one woman show called The Discourse of a Maid, meaning like the maiden,
Right.
and it was based on Celtic mythology and storytelling because of my love with Joseph Campbell.
Right.
You know, and it was a profound show, and I had to give the audience a crash course on Druidry in order for you to understand why was you going to be the bard for the evening. So it had a lot that lightness and comedy in that aspect, but deep, profound because it was my spiritual journey.
Sure.
I couldn't preach to you. That wouldn't be fair. I had to just do my thing. And then if you liked it, I would tell a Celtic myth. I would tell my own myth, present time myth, based on what I got from that. And at the end of the show, E-Grail came out. She was my dream weaver of the future. She would weave what we learned from the past to the present to create a future myth, which was totally what the bards used to do of the Celtic tradition.
Right.
So, all right, so now I can get you back to Scotland. Because I went on my sabbatical to write, I thought I would write a trilogy. Discourse of a Maid, I wanted to write the middle story, which I was going to call The Movement of the Modron. Modron is another
That's
name
from
of
King
Celtic.
Arthur, wasn't it?
Well, she was another mother of everything.
Okay.
Another name for the mother of everything.
Right.
And you don't hear a lot about the goddesses in Celtic tradition because the monks were doing the writing down and they were pulling out the women and they were decreasing the ability of the goddess.
We haven't stopped.
Oh, we're still not.
Yeah.
I mean, goddesses in Celtic tradition were all about fertility.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden now they're making them into goddesses of war. Skoha was the turner of the wheel. She was a birth and death and rebirth. And all of a sudden now they've created these stories where she had this darkness around her, and she was, the warriors were coming to her to learn this, to get weapons from her. And I'm thinking, no, she was originally the turner of the wheel. Why were the warriors going to her? What was she really teaching them? What was the weapon that she was giving them? And I think it had something to do about ladling the feminine back into them.
It has to be.
Right.
In
So that was
integration
going to be my
of the
story.
Male, okay, I'm with you. Yeah.
And then the third one eventually I would write was going to be the Song of the Cailleach. The Cailleach is the name for the crone stage. It would be Maiden Mother Crone.
Right.
So here I am. I'm now in the Isle of Skye in Scotland. I've got my little journal out, and I'm writing away about Skoha. I'm writing my own personal myth based on this, an army story of my dad, and connected with this kid that my son went to school with, who wanted to be a Marine and was going to go off to, Iraq. I mean, it was just, and this amazing story I told this kid. And I realized, oh my God, I'm a modern day Skaha to this kid. So I'm writing this whole thing, and it's cloudy and it's raining in Scotland. It's wonderful. It's finally sunny. And I'm thinking, I'm going to go to the fairy Glen now to drop my mom and dad's ashes off. Fine, go away. And it's in Scotland, everybody believes in fairies. Everyone over here humors me when I talk about fairies.
And booze.
Yeah, you name it. So, see, even the dog believes in fairies,
Absolutely.
right? So, oh my gosh, this time is over. We need
It's like-
another 5 hours.
I know we do.
So very quickly.
I figured we were going to
okay.
get in
So,
trouble.
all right, we're
time-wise.
going to. So I'm talking to the Scottish investment banker, and I said, "How do we get to the Glen?" And he says, "Oh, Rassie, it's really easy how to get there." And he's telling me all these mystical stories about as I'm supposed to go down the Glen. And I said, "Oh yeah, I know about the rowan trees. I know about this." And he pulled back and he said, "You're of the old faith." Oh well, then, lassie, I'm going to tell you about this, that, and the other thing. And I finally said, "Well, how will I know I'm in the Glen?" He said, "Lassie, you always know when you're in the Glen."
Huh.
And I got down there, and this was an amazing mystical experience. It was like the earth was high, not physically high, but frequency shifted.
Right.
I came in, I knew how to ask permission to come in. I got the little tickle in the heart. I came in, I gifted, I had crystal sand from Siesta Key, I had bark, I had, bread, I had some wine to gift. I'm asked permission to leave my mom and dad's ashes. I got the little tickle. It was a ride. I sang the art song that my mom and dad wrote about enchantments. I'm doing her poetry. I'm singing other songs. I'm crying. And I started telling about these four groups of people that I was working with. My persons with, developmental disabilities, and my little Linda Blum, who has a persons with Down syndrome, and now she's facing Alzheimer's. My little Scottish girl with leukemia. I was talking about all the men that I do. They call me the Grail Maiden because I put them on journey quests and they're all dealing with their HIV status. All the little children that I deal with, that I'm their mentor or healer, emotional release, that are labeled ADHD or some other labeling that drives me crazy because they're such huge, amazing spirits. And I'm like getting this amazing meditation, and I'm excited. I give permission to leave, and I'm thinking that was the best 45 minutes to an hour I ever spent. I go up the hill, I get to my bed and breakfast. I'm really hungry, not even aware that the sun had moved because it was 5.5 hours later. So you really lose track of time.
Time disappears.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I got home, and at that time, my journal was now filled with those stories, and that's when I started writing. And that the other part is on the back shelf. I'll get to it eventually. But these stories were written, and I gifted them, thinking I was giving it to them just as stories, and found out that they were actually impacting the caregiver. So these were really fairy tales for the caregiver and all of us.
Right.
And I decided to do them as living room theater pieces, reading them, until my ex-husband said, "Annie, Linda Lovely Goes to Broadway is got to be on stage, girl." And so that's what we're developing.
And give us a little quick synopsis of Linda Lovely Goes to Broadway, because
Well,
it's a lovely play. I really enjoyed
she
it.
just lives. As I watch people in Alzheimer's, they leave us. They as their brains are becoming lazy. She tracks, and I know from being in a coma that you're always there. So she just cycles off into her world, and she lives in the world of theater. When she'd come around, she'd go, "Annie Morrison, out of my dreams," because she was wanted to be Lori in Oklahoma,
Right.
And she wrote a musical. I witnessed her. She wrote this wonderful musical. We had professional actors perform it. And my dream was to have professional actors on Broadway do it as a fundraiser for her. So I decided to invent this story of taking her up there with her mom and dad on this road trip because she was going to be honored with her little musical being done in New York.
Right.
And but all Linda is going through her Alzheimer's. So while all this is stuff that's happening in her world, this world, she's having her inner world of the theater. And so I don't want to give it away. It's an amazing thing that happens when she gets to New York. You'll just have to have me come to your living room, or come to New York, or come to Sarasota to see me perform Linda Lovely Goes to Broadway, because it was a treat.
And it's a wonderful play. You just won a grant to
Yes,
expand that and
to expand it.
and actually maybe even
Yeah,
take
I'd
it
like
someplace.
actually pay some people to help me with it for a change. Instead of saying, "Can you help me make a soundtrack?" It'd be nice to actually have some to do some and to learn how to market. I don't know how to market myself. That's my biggest fault. I'm like to just go on the stage and do it.
Well,
so.
I'm not sure that's a fault, but
It isn't? Okay.
so many artists are caught with that, though.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have the marketing machine behind you,
Yeah.
you can be really talented and
Yeah.
you just don't go anywhere.
I just want to play my right brain too much, I guess. That whole linear figuring out the marketing thing, I'm lost.
I think Tom has been putting your website and your contact information up,
Okay.
and so we've been doing a little marketing right here.
Excellent.
So
Okay.
this,
Yeah.
on a very personal kind of level. How are we doing time-wise, Tom?
We
2
get
minutes?
2 minutes.
Have you got something that we left out that you can do in about a minute and a half that you'd like to talk about?
Sacred be the dream in motion. Sacred be the dream. True be labor held in reverie. Labor held a gleam. But where neither weaver jointly dream and labor barren fall, may the stars in brightness for thee free your dreams in blessings all.
Oh, fantastic. So I think you got an idea of just how talented this lady is. you get a chance to see her, you definitely should do that. Annie, thank you.
You are most welcome.
I have
I'd love to
enjoyed
come
the
back
evening.
and talk more.
Oh, and we will have you
Okay.
back to talk more
Okay.
for sure. So be sure and come back next week. Remember, I have Steve McAllister and the McAllister Code. You'll have a great evening, another great evening. And in the meantime, between now and Tuesday of next week, be sure and accentuate the positive and have a fantastic week.
You're off.
Ah!
Great job, sweetie.
Oh, I could talk for another 3 hours. I was trying to talk as fast as possible.
Hey, sweetheart.
Hi.
You did pretty good not to get stirring them up.
I stood out there until I heard you say, have
Carissa,
a fantastic day.
Carissa, meet Annie.
Hi, how are you?
Annie, this is going to be the first Broadway star you ever met.
Oh, yeah?
Oh yeah, Annie's been on Broadway and starred in plays up there, and she's,
She's got a beautiful
Second
voice.
one I met